and then we'll be able to and also be able to um, send those questions to the appropriate panelist. Um, I I welcome you all to this video conference today. It's a great honor to be here. It is terrific to see GOGME take this kind of role to put what's happening in a global maritime context and drilling it down to its impacts for the Gulf of Guinea. And I think that's one of the things that we will try to do here today. Um, the, as you all know, the Red Sea serves as a crucial maritime route for international trade, and it facilitates transportation between Europe, Asia, Africa. Approximately 12 to 15% of the global seaborne trade passed through the Red Sea in 2023. The significant volume of international traffic underscores the strategic importance of the Red Sea as a key transit route for commercial shipping. Since November 2023, the Houthis have been launching attacks against ships, causing shipping to be diverted away from the Red Sea, threatening the safety of seafarers, trade, and freedom of navigation. On 19 November 2023, the Houthis attacked a commercial ship in the Red Sea and have since targeted over 37 ships as of 12 March. This is the latest data. This is the latest data from IMO, and I just wanted to say that IMO views this as having two major impacts. It has an impact on trade overall, and one of the impacts for the Gulf of Guinea is that 90%, there's been a 90% increase in the tonnage, Cape of Good Hope tonnage arrivals since this started. And the second part is the impact on the environment. There have been two vessels, the motor vessel Ruby Mar and the motor vessel True Confidence, that have been sunk, and that has potential environmental damage due to the sinkings of the ship and also due to the cargo that's on board in any future casualty. So I just wanted to provide that as sort of the context, the background for this, and then I'll be happy to take my question when the time comes. Lawrence, back to you.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that brief and concise background to the Red Sea situation. I believe that background will set the context for the subsequent discussions and contributions that we will be engaging in the next hour. And so I would like to go into the first round of questions. Dr. Nrobi, I know he's on the call, and if you are ready, I would like to ask your opinion, seek your opinion on what, from your perspective, what is the nature of the Houthis? What is their motivation for attacking vessels using the Red Sea? And then what is the likelihood of the Red Sea escalating in the region?
Well, thank you very much. I actually missed the very last part of that question. What was the nature of? Sorry, what was the very last part of your question? What was the nature of?
The last question is, what is the likelihood of the Red Sea situation escalating within the region? Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I see some familiar names and faces. I have, unfortunately, had the challenge of dealing with the Houthis for a number of years now. And they are a singular group. They are not like other threats that we have faced elsewhere. They're not like the Taliban, which wanted to govern. They're not like Al-Qaeda that wanted to attack an ideological concept in quite the same way. They are a group that considers itself a movement bent on establishing a holy empire. They want an empire. They are looking to control ultimately Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. They want to rule from Jerusalem. So this group has been around for a number of decades, and it's been very overlooked in both international security circles and even regional security circles. The lack of familiarity in how the Houthis think, how they operate, what they do, has been part of the problem that we have had so far. When the Houthis attacked the Galaxy Leader and took it and turned it into a museum on the 19th of November, the response was, okay, these are pirates. We've dealt with pirates. Now we need to establish a response. But then they started launching missile and drone attacks. And once we saw those attacks starting to affect the shipping industry's sense of security in the region, we saw a naval response that has unfortunately only played into the narrative that the Houthis wanted. The Houthis have for the last 10 years claimed that they were at war with the United States and the United Kingdom. So it is no accident that when the United States and the United Kingdom jointly started attacking Houthi sites on land in Yemen, they found themselves excited. They found themselves gaining in global attention, relevance, momentum, financing. They have actually become much, much stronger over the last several months because of the response that they've received than if we had taken a different approach. And the problem is that strategically, we often fail to recognize what matters to our opponent or our enemy. For many, a deterrent effect would be brought by attacks on your missile sites, attacks on your weapon stores, attacks on some of your launch sites. For the Houthis, that doesn't matter. And if you wanted any evidence of that, all you had to do was look at the last 10 years. The Houthis began a civil war in Yemen in 2014 and really became the dominant force fighting against the government of Yemen after a coup in 2015. And so they have a long-standing history of fighting significant forces. The Saudis bombed them for years. And yet the Saudis are now desperate for a peace deal to be able to stop having to deal with these really intransigent, really difficult rebel forces that have come to control about a quarter of the physical territory of Yemen and about 70% of the Yemeni population. And that is where I think we have to recognize that they had a huge effect on Yemen for the last decade, but nobody really knew about them. They were unknown in international circles. And one of the dangers of this whole situation is that other groups may look at them and say, hey, those guys were powerful, but nobody knew about them. The moment they started attacking shipping, they became a global power. The US Navy has elevated them through its rhetoric to the same level as Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. They have said that this is the first major naval confrontation since World War II. That is gold for the Houthis in terms of their ethos, their mentality, their ideology, because now it puts them on the same footing as other imperial entities. So we have a real challenge. The shipping industry has demonstrated a tremendous amount of agility in finding ways to reroute around the continent of Africa. The figure of 90% is really on average in terms of the Cape of Good Hope increases. It actually was up to 137% year on year transits around the Cape of Good Hope just last week. And so we are seeing a major increase in the amount of vessel traffic around Africa. And much of that is containerized, which is a challenge we can come back to. Because I think that it'd be useful, and I'll hold my comments on this, to talk about the implications for the rest of the continent. But I think that in terms of understanding the Houthi mentality, they are motivated by their own drive for imperial control. The notion that they are in some ways protesting Israel-Gaza is hypocritical. The Houthis have over the last decade killed more Muslim Arabs than the Israelis have in the entire 75 years of its existence. The Houthis have literally, in just one town alone, sniper killed 379 children. So their notion of protesting the killing of innocents is farcical. It is hypocritical. It is almost cruel, given their own history. And unfortunately, we've let them have that narrative. We've let them say that they were starting these attacks on global maritime commerce. They've started these attacks on innocent seafarers. They've started their attacks on the food supplies, the medical supplies, the critical goods that flow to countries all over the world as a way of protesting Israel-Gaza. And in fact, I've said many times publicly, I've testified about this in Congress, saying that they have been using the Palestinian people. They absolutely are. But they're also using Israel. They need and want Israel to keep attacking Gaza, because the more that Israel continues to attack, the more that they are secure in their own region. No other Muslim Arab state will do anything to stop them, lest it be perceived as something to help Israel, in so long as Israel is continuing to attack Gaza. And they know that. They're very savvy in terms of regional dynamics. They're very savvy in terms of their concept of how to maintain their own security. And so they are continuing, as long as Israel continues. Egypt, which is losing 57% of its canal revenues. So the canal brings in about $9.5 billion a year in fees and about $56 billion a year to Egypt annually in GDP. 57% of that being cut is painful. That is putting the Egyptian economy in a very precarious position, especially at the same time that Egypt is taking the majority of the Palestinian refugees that are actually leaving Gaza. And so we are seeing a situation where countries that are being harmed almost existentially are still silent because of the nature of the regional tensions. And that is a very calculated and very challenging situation to address. And so I think we have to look at the Houthis as being more savvy than we perhaps gave them credit for. And they have launched essentially 5 layers of escalation thus far. The first one was the Galaxy Leader. They boarded and took that ship. That was one and done. They did not want the hassle of having to hold a vessel again after that. So one and done on taking vessels. Phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 are now all concurrent. But phase 2 was the launching of the aerial bombardment, both with missiles and drones. Phase 3 were surface attacks, both with manned and unmanned vessels. Phase 4 were unmanned underwater systems being used to threaten maritime commerce. Phase 5 are now the information operations. And I'll end by saying this, that we are in a very strange place now, because 5 months ago, if this ragtag group of Houthi rebels in Yemen made a press statement saying that they had attacked a major commercial vessel, nobody would have believed them. Nobody would have even paid any attention to it. It wouldn't have made the news unless there was an equal statement from the shipping line and a huge amount of international attention and a whole lot of people explaining why this even mattered. Nobody would have cared. Now they can make a statement that they have attacked a vessel even when they haven't, and every newspaper around the world will report it. And so they actually recognize from the information space that they're starting to win, and we are letting them win. They have launched a whole branded entity called the HOCC, the Humanitarian Operations Coordination Center. The HOCC is the muck that the Houthis use to attack ships. They are literally the entity that is launching all these attacks. And yet, because they call themselves the Humanitarian Operations Coordination Center, they have actually gotten the attention of NGOs and civil society organizations who think that they are good. They've gotten the attention of shipping lines that think that they are some kind of response mechanism. And they have actually used that position to claim to be the Yemen Navy to better position themselves in terms of attacking shipping. So Phil mentioned the True Confidence, the Barbados flagged vessel that was hit by 2 missiles, leading to the deaths of several of the crew and the abandonment of the vessel. That vessel was actually on its way into the Bab el-Mandeb when the HOCC contacted them saying, this is the Yemen Navy, please divert course in order for you to be safe and secure. We ask you to turn around and then head on a course south-southeast. And they did. And what the Houthis were doing was using that position in order to be able to direct them to where they wanted to fire their missiles. And so they actually managed to position the True Confidence to the exact location where they found it most appealing to be able to target and hit them. So this is a really nefarious use of information operations. The very last thing I'll say is that if we think that they are really doing the hard work to identify which of the vessels that are remaining going through the Red Sea are tied in some ways to the US, the UK, or Israel, we're laughable. They are in many ways letting us do the hard work to find those connections, find that nexus that they really don't care about. They do not care if they get it wrong. It doesn't matter if they hit a vessel that isn't in some ways tied to the US, UK, or Israel. They are just enjoying the attention that comes from every single one of these attacks on maritime commerce. They have to be stopped, and we can talk about what will actually get them to do that, because what we're doing right now isn't there. I'll stop there. Lawrence, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robbie, for that very insightful breakdown of the timeline of events that have taken place since the Houthi attacks. I think you've been able to excellently let us understand the ideology behind the Israel-Hamas war, as well as the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. One profound statement that you made is that the Houthis are making the rest of the world do a lot of the hard work. And I think that as we move along in the conversations, one of the issues or one of the questions that we'll need to answer is whether the situation requires a political solution or one that is of military action. And so we'll come back to that question again, but I would like to move on to Admiral Gather and ask him that, so Admiral Gather, in your opinion, what do you think are the consequences of shifting away from the Red Sea to alternative routes via the Gulf of Guinea? And so essentially, we want to find out what are the implications of alternative routes, either through the Cape of Good Hope or the Gulf of Guinea. The floor is yours, Admiral Gather. Thank you.
All right. Before I start, let me thank Gogmi for putting in place this discussion today, and also inviting me to be a speaker in this all-important discussion. As have been highlighted by the first two speakers, we can see that the incident in the Red Sea has resulted in increased shipping activities within the Gulf of Guinea. And definitely this has consequences in terms of the security, the trade, economic, infrastructure, environment, as well as the geopolitics. As in specificity, I would like to say that the increased maritime activity within the Gulf of Guinea, before now, we know that Gulf of Guinea has been a very busy route, having over 1,500 vessels transiting daily. And with the increase, this is far more now. And we have known that, albeit at a low level currently, the Gulf of Guinea has faced a lot of security challenges in terms of piracy, kidnapping of crews for ransom, armed robbery at sea, some illicit trades. So with the more volume of ships, commercial ships transiting the Gulf of Guinea, there is the potential for these crimes to resurge, against this new traffic that has come into the region. And the increased insecurity would definitely compound the situation that is happening in the Red Sea. And this calls for the partners within the Gulf of Guinea region to take preemptive action. We should not wait for when this escalation takes place. we are talking about the Houthis, but we all know that in the era of terrorism, the non-state actors, they are interlinked. They're interlinked. The Houthis today can feel that if they have diverted from the Red Sea, they could have partners that will emerge within the Gulf of Guinea to start doing the same thing in the Gulf of Guinea. So we will not say that because what is happening in the Red Sea has not happened in the Gulf of Guinea, that will fold their hands. And I think this program is a wake-up call for the Gulf of Guinea countries to take action that will, deal with any such resurgence of insecurity, especially in the area of piracy and even terrorism, maritime terrorism, which has not been so prevalent within the Gulf of Guinea. And this can be done through the, emplacement of more surveillance, naval presence, especially in terms of also improving the Yaoundé architecture. These plans have been in the pipeline for a long time, and I think this is the time to really work faster than the bad guys will do. Especially the Gulf of Guinea Combined Maritime Task Force that was approved or agreed in principle by the chiefs of the naval staff within the Gulf of Guinea since the 22nd of May 2023. I think this is the time for the African Union to take steps to operationalize that task force to ensure that with the increased traffic within the Gulf of Guinea, there is appropriate security as well for ships and crew. And also there's also the consequences on trade and economics. Dr. Rabbi talked about the effect of this Red Sea incident on Egypt. It's same thing to other countries within the region. And even within the Gulf of Guinea, the increased traffic is going to require a lot of investment within the maritime sector, especially in terms of infrastructure. Because some of the vessels that will be transiting now, in terms of the sizes, the cargo, and all those things, were not things that were being experienced within the Gulf of Guinea. Therefore, this will call for more investment to be able to accommodate this new in the traffic. For logistics support will be there. The need for even crew maintenance and crew exchange. All this will require heightened investment, especially by the business the maritime environment, as well as it is not until these things, the realities come upon us, that will now wake up to do something about it. These are things that need to start taking place right now. And then there is also the consequence on the environment. With the increased traffic of commercial shipping, the potential for environmental impact in terms of pollution have increased. And therefore, there is need to place robust monitoring and remedial action processes in place within the Gulf of Guinea. The states of the Gulf of Guinea need to come up with new plans that will accommodate this level of traffic that we are witnessing. As I said earlier, they said that early preparations will aid success. And therefore, the countries are supposed to take note of these happenings right now and take remedial steps to ensure that we put in place stringent regulations, monitoring, and appropriate response mechanism for any untoward situations in terms of environmental impacts. And then another implication is in terms of geopolitical aspects. With the new movements or the traffic within the Gulf of Guinea, both in the Red Sea region and in the Gulf of Guinea, there will be alliances, new alliances in terms of the changing maritime landscape, especially the trade, the changes in trade. There will be alliances and new, partnerships. But in all, there are going to be implications that I have listed. But what does it entail? It means that going forward, the various stakeholders need to sit and come up with cogent strategies to address the implications of these consequences. And I believe that this particular meeting today is going to come up with such steps that the stakeholders will take up and work with to give us a very secured environment, even as we witness upsurge in maritime traffic within the Gulf of Guinea. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this.
Thank you very much, Rad Morganda, for those excellent submissions. I think you've pretty much made it clear that there are definitely some implications with alternative routing through the Cape of Good Hope or the Gulf of Guinea from a security perspective and also from an economic perspective. And perhaps this is also a sort of a clarion call for our authorities, coastal authorities, to be more proactive in ensuring that enforcement is key in operations, maritime operations, as well as monitoring of the effective monitoring of the environment and constant collaboration among the security actors to ensure that any kind of insurgence is apprehended before it escalates in the region. And so thank you very much for that excellent submission. And I believe there are some questions and comments that will be made then with regards to your submission, and we'll come back to that. So I would like to move on now to Captain Philhar and then ask him that, so Captain Philhar, in your opinion, have international efforts to address the Red Sea situation attack been largely successful? And what are the factors that influence the formation of Operation Prosperity Guardian? We also know that there is the EU partners that are also sort of addressing this issue, and then there's also the Indian Navy. So perhaps you could take us through some of these developments in terms of the military response to the Red Sea situation.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. First of all, the United States launched Operation Prosperity Guardian, as Lawrence mentioned, in December of 2023 to respond to the Houthi-led attacks in the on shipping in the Red Sea. The coalition has more than 10 members and is working under the umbrella of the Combined Maritime Forces and the leadership of its Task Force 153, which focuses on security in the Red Sea. So that's one international effort. The other international efforts on 19 February 2024, the European Union's naval force launched Operation Aspides with a defensive mandate to protect shipping targeted by attacks by sea and or air. And the operation is operating just like the U.S. in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 2722. And that's worth, on this group, that's worth Googling that Security Council Resolution 2722 and take a look at what that guidance is for everyone here. I would like to just make a couple comments on what Admiral Agata said. I think he made some really important points because this is more than just an issue of the Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea. It has not only complex international disruptions, but it has far-reaching implications for global trade and for geopolitical alignments. And that's one of the things that he said, and I just wanted to underscore that. The alignments are pretty clear in terms of the US and the EU and the others, like the Indians, who have Indian Navy, who has also participated, and the alignment of the Houthis as proxies to Iran, the Russian and Chinese side of this. And other countries, particularly in Africa, are going to have to start making some choices. And I just wanted to underscore that. Admiral Agata said that, but that's really what we're talking about. There are going to be future choices. And it's very important, as Admiral Agata said, that there's a strategy in Africa to deal with this, to deal with the impacts. There have been several countries, Namibia, for example, and others, who are using this as an opportunity to increase investment in infrastructure because of the increase in traffic. That's a huge increase. That's a huge opportunity. And that is the type of opportunity that when Ghana put together its NIMS strategy, it talked about what are the opportunities, the economic opportunities that are presented by the sea and by the fact that you're located in an area now that is transited much more by international traffic. And what are the opportunities? What would an investment in ports do to increase revenue? Those types of analysis need to be made. And several countries are doing that. I've been in a close discussion with a country that if you took a look at, it's an island country, and if you took a look at the AIS increases in tracks since the Red Sea crisis, there's a huge amount of traffic that goes around both sides of the island. And none of that traffic is right now is stopping in West Africa. And that's something that is a huge opportunity. And some countries, like this island country, are recognizing that, looking for investors and looking for a plan to actually incorporate this change in regional trade in the Gulf of Guinea into something that can be used economically. I also am really happy that Admiral Agata mentioned the Yaoundé Code of Conduct and the implementation, the continued implementation of the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, and AIM 2050 in the AU, on the AU side, because both of those are, as all of you know, the objective is economic development, enabling security, maritime security for economic development. And that implementation is one of the things that the IMO is very interested in supporting in 2024. And there's a new program that IMO has called BAY, Boosting African Implementation of the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, BAY. And we are just now at the point of hiring people and moving into a support role for the Yaoundé Code of Conduct architecture. So I wanted to mention that. Finally, there are lessons learned from what we are seeing happening with the Houthis. And the Houthis, I think, were not given they were viewed as ragtag and coming out of caves. But I was in Yemen when the Coast Guard in Yemen was formed. So Yemen has officially a Coast Guard, not a Navy. And the Yemeni Coast Guard was comprised of 50% from northern Yemen and 50% from southern Yemen. And the 50% from northern Yemen were Houthis. And I can tell you as an instructor, they were the A students. And that's all I'll say about that. So so I think that Ian Ralby has done a really good job in terms of talking about what their capabilities are. But this is not, I don't even like to hear ragtag associated with them because it makes it sound, it diminishes them. And they have managed to use technology to disrupt traffic and to challenge navies. And that, so one final thing that I'll say, and that is this idea. It is a threat to Gulf of Guinea because it's demonstrating, the Houthis are demonstrating that you can use technology to disrupt trade. And I think all of the navies and coast guards in the Gulf of Guinea need to evaluate whether or not they're prepared to deal with this. And whether they understand not only just how to use drones, UAVs, but how to defend against them. And this is an asymmetric weapon that is the future. And it really needs some focus. And you need military UAVs to respond, not commercial out of the box or things that countries are willing to sell you because they want to sell it to you. So this technology issue is a very important one. The other copycat issue, because face it, the criminals in the Gulf of Guinea used copycats from East Africa in the past. You'll remember that most of the issues with piracy in the Gulf of Guinea were piracy of the cargo. After the Somali experience, kidnap for ransom became the thing that was done in the Gulf of Guinea. Well, what's in store for the future? I can tell you that UAVs will be a threat in the future. And the other issue is the way the Houthis used social media to document what they did on that first attack, and then to not rely on the global media to provide the news about what they did. They did it themselves. So what if you had criminal groups in the Gulf of Guinea that use social media to document the way they kidnap for ransom? And then what they do to hostages? What's the response to that? How do you deal with that? Most of the countries in the Gulf of Guinea have trouble even keeping their websites up. So there's a technological issue that really needs to be planned for, and I reinforce what Rear Admiral Agata mentioned in his talks. It's important to have those types of discussions now, and when there are conferences like the conference that's coming up in Nigeria, the International Maritime Conference that is coming in May, those types of strategic discussions need to be put into the discussion. Not just let's have meetings and eat hors d'oeuvres and have food. Let's have meaningful discussions with action plans. And the action plan part has been missing. So I think I'm gonna stop there for a second, and we can start to take some questions. Lawrence, I'll put that back to you. I'll let you select that from the questions from the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that submission. I think you've been pretty much clear on what direction African countries should be taking with regards to the whole Red Sea situation. And I would like to come back to you again, but I would like to announce at this point that if you have any questions, for those of us joining us, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box and we'll respond to them accordingly. And so for the last 45 minutes, we've tried to look at the ideology behind the Houthi attacks, the implication for alternative routes, and the military responses to the series of attacks in the Red Sea area. And I would like to come back again to Phil, your last statement, and maybe Dr. Ayanrobi and Radbro can equally respond to that. And you said that you touched on the issue of technology and the fact that it's a threat to the Gulf of Guinea countries, and it's something that you think they should be looking at how best they can deal with such situations. And so I would like to ask you that in that regard, and in terms of African countries forming alliances with international partners, what is the simple response to the situation? Is it a political one? Is it a political problem? Do you recognize the Red Sea situation as a political problem that needs a political solution, or as a military problem that requires military solution? So, and I invite Dr. Ayanrobi and Brad Margada and of course Phil to respond to this question. Thank you.
Do you want me to chime in first, or Phil, are you going to go first?
Ian, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I think this is a great question, and I'm seeing some of the questions coming up in the chat as well. I think in terms of the Houthis and the threat they pose, the answer is not clearly a yes or no as to whether it's a military solution. Yet military has to be involved, but part of the question is who and how and what are they going to do? So on the 11th of January, when we initially heard that the US and the UK were going to launch strikes against Houthi missile sites, I was live on Sky News when some of the announcements were made, and I said this is a terrible idea because without threatening what the Houthis care about, it won't have any deterrent effect. And what we have to recognize is that deterrence is a relative concept. What deters one person will be very different than what deters another, and the same is true for groups of people. So the Houthis have a very battle-tested way of operating. They've been at this for a long time. Bombing their missile sites doesn't deter them, and that was very clear to anyone who actually knew them. What does deter them, what does upset them, what does change their behavior is when they feel that some of the territory they hold is being threatened. When they are on the back foot in terms of territorial control, they come to the table in a different way. And so the answer to what changes them has to be targeted at what actually is their motivation and interest. And so if we start actually moving towards a situation where we encourage the government of Yemen to take back Hodeidah, to even use force to implement some of the agreements that the Houthis have signed but reneged on, it may start to change their momentum, because if they feel like what they care about most is being threatened, they're going to realign their efforts to be able to protect that. They've gotten plenty out of the maritime space. In some ways, I think they're getting bored. In fact, what seems to be the case now is that the main target in the Red Sea is not so much commercial shipping, but primarily the U.S. and to a lesser extent the U.K. and other warships that are there. They love seeing the gray holes there because it emboldens their narrative that they're at war with the mighty powers of the West, and that is part of their ideology, their ethos, their mentality, their narrative. And because of their incredible ability to do information operations, as Phil said, I mean, what they did in terms of filming the Galaxy Leader attack, where they landed on the ship, took it and brought it back to Yemen, their communications capabilities are impressive. Same thing with their Humanitarian Operations Coordination Center and their branding of themselves as the Yemen Navy, when, as Phil said, the government of Yemen's force is the Yemen Coast Guard. It's all convinced those who did not know about them, did not watch them, did not pay attention. And it's actually persuaded people in the region. So their numbers have grown immeasurably since the 19th of November. They have managed to recruit, gain momentum, gain money, gain financing, gain attention. And it's made them much stronger because of it. And so because of our attacks, we have actually gotten because the U.S. and the U.K. attacking their weapons sites and the narrative that has flown from it, we've actually gotten Iran to stop being so covert in their arming of the Houthis and do so more openly. On March 10th last year, the Iranians and the Saudis sat down together for the first time in 8 years. They met for the first time in 8 years. And in Beijing, agreed a rapprochement. They agreed to start talking to each other again. Part of the agreement was for the Iranians to stop arming the Houthis. Clearly, they don't feel any pressure at this point to continue doing that. They don't feel any pressure to abide by that. And so our military solution has actually changed the regional context, and it hasn't made it better thus far. Could a military solution make things better? Yes, but who it is, how it's done, what the actual approach is, are all critical. And this goes back to the point of strategy. We have to know ourselves, and we have to recognize that maybe we aren't the face that needs to be the one carrying the water on this. We have to know our terrain. What is the important part of the Red Sea? Are we making the Gulf of Aden less safe for approaches to Djibouti to get critical food aid in by continuing to have warships in that area that are serving as targets? We have to know our enemy, and we have to understand the Houthi ideology, the Houthi mentality, and how they approach. I think just three things on their technology front that are really important. The Houthis have been piloting very low-tech, unmanned technology for years. So in 2016, they actually blew up a pier in the Red Sea as they were trying to pilot the use of a remote-controlled bomb boat. Now, what they were looking at was that back in 2000, in October 2000, an attack on the USS Cole had killed 17 American sailors and been a major turning point in the U.S.-Yemen relationship. They had, in the Gulf of Aden, managed to attack a U.S. gray hull. That incident and that situation involved, however, people on board the vessel that rammed into the hull of the Cole having to die with them. So they had a group of Fedayeen suicide bombers willing to lose their lives in the process. And so they started looking at how to potentially imitate that same impact without having to die. And so they were using very low-tech remote control bomb boats. What we are seeing now is that off-the-shelf technology has improved so much since 2016 that they're able to deploy all kinds of different systems that create both chaos and uncertainty. And for anybody that is going to feel like they're going to benefit from chaos, the opportunities to do so are immense. And so I think we need to look at three particular kinetic concerns out of the Houthi activity. Number one is that the unmanned threat now is huge, and that comes in aerial, it comes in surface, and it comes in subsurface. Number two, our infrastructure is absolutely critical to protect effectively. Look at what just happened with the submarine cables that were cut in West Africa. The impact of that is enormous, and that it can be replicated pretty easily. The Houthis know, and they've said this over and over again, that a third of the world's internet traverses the Red Sea. If they cut a third of the world's internet, everyone's going to feel that, not just the immediate neighboring states. Just like world trade is globalized, so too is global communications and the global financial flows that rely on those cables. $10 trillion of economic activity flow through submarine cables every day. That's in every kind of transaction, little movement of money, purchase. That means that if you cut out a third of the infrastructure capable of moving that money, everyone feels it. Markets go offline, all kinds of things happen, and the whole world experiences impact. And the third, and this is a blend of the kinetic and non-kinetic, is the information operations piece of it, where you can actually make people blink and take action on things that may or may not have happened, depending on how much you are able to sell a false narrative. And the Houthis are demonstrating again that the power of accessibility, largely through those submarine cables, of so many different media platforms allows for a well-oiled information operation to create kinetic chaos, even without taking direct action. So those things are really important to emphasize. I want to close what I'll say by just mentioning that I think there are 5 immediate impacts on the Gulf of Guinea that need to be thought of. 4 of them are bad, 1 of them's good. The first is the trade disruption. Somebody asked in the chat, how much is all this costing? The Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal for 6 days back in March of 2021. Ernst & Young did a forensic analysis of the cost of those 6 days to the shipping industry and came out with a figure of $416 million per hour. That's a great hourly rate. I would love it myself, but that is how much it cost the shipping industry to have that vessel stuck and that critical choke point blocked. At the moment, the Red Sea is down about 57% of tonnage transits. The Panama Canal is down massively because of the historic low water levels. That means global shipping is theoretically in a horrible place, much worse than even just the blockage of the Red Sea alone. However, the good news out of that is that because of the supply chain disruption caused by the pandemic, the shipping industry has developed a little bit more of an understanding of its need to be resilient. And this is particularly true in the container space, less so in the overall tanker market, even less so in the LPG tanker market and the LNG tanker market. But the containerized traffic that brings our goods has shown an incredible degree of agility. I'll come back to that in a minute, but we have to recognize that right now, the decrease in some of the flows is less financial, but more on timing. So things are taking longer, but they are still getting there, and because of that agility. And containerized traffic isn't replicatable. So if you have a tanker full of marine gas oil, it can get from and it has to be rerouted. Another tanker of marine gas oil can supplement it. But if you have a container with your own personal goods on board, you can't just supplement that with another container. That specific container has to get to its specific location. So that agility in the container space is particularly good news because it is the least replicatable of any of the trade flows that we have. So that's a little bit of positive on that first negative. The second, the increased traffic around the continent isn't just, and I want to say, fantastic point bringing up the environmental impact. The environmental impact of the situation is horrible with regard to the sinking of the Ruby Mar. I could talk to you all day about some of the internal discussions that were occurring as that went down. And the lack of awareness of how to deal with that was evident. Nobody could understand initially which marine insurance policy it was that they needed to talk to. Nobody could understand exactly who was responsible for the oil spill from the bunker tank. Nobody could understand who was responsible for the potential environmental impact of the ammonium phosphate sulfate on board. There was all kinds of confusion. And there's also a hazard to navigation, which adds to the mix. And the lack of maritime familiarity, even among some of the maritime operators in the navies, couldn't overcome the challenge that was occurring. And so we can talk about some of that, but that requires us being more aware, more vigilant, more prepared. And that's particularly problematic when you think about these larger container vessels, these larger commercial vessels that have too much draft to call at most African ports, now going around the continent. Where's the safe harbor? Where's the berth if a storm comes through? How are they going to handle that? So we really do need to think about how African ports can become more resilient, and I'll come back to that in 1 second. The third, after the trade disruption and the burdens of increased traffic, are the concerns for inspiration, and we can talk about that more. But I think different groups are realizing that low-tech options for attacking the maritime space can yield high visibility globally. That's not a good lesson for terrorist groups or other nefarious actors to learn. The fourth is
Dr. Robbie, I'll come back to you on the lessons.
Okay.
I'll come back to you on the lessons, and I just want to first appreciate your perspective on sort of painting a good picture of how crucial the Red Sea area is in terms of a choke point for global supply chains, and 3 takeaways from you as well. The use of UAS and UAVs in this whole Red Sea situation, the protection of critical maritime infrastructure, and then the operational the information operations dimension of the Houthi attacks. And so I think these are very key takeaways from your submission, and I believe they are very much elaborative, and I would like to thank you very much for that. I think because of time, I would like to move to the other panel. Of course, Dr. Rabi, there are some questions that I would like you to respond to, so I'll come back to you again. But Phil, let me come to you. Your hands were up.
Thank you, Lawrence. What I'd like to do is let me pass this to Admiral Agata. I'd like to have his comments on what has been said. I think that there have been a lot of really good points made by Ian and by Admiral Agata, and I'd like to again hone in on this question of, is this a military problem? Is it a political problem? A geostrategic problem? Is it an economic problem? Or is it all of them? And what are the solutions? And I think the regional solution that applies in the case of the Red Sea is part of IMO's Djibouti Code of Conduct, which has been convened. The regional participants of the Djibouti Code of Conduct, particularly the Arab countries in the Djibouti Code of Conduct, their presence and their role is very important. True also with the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, which Admiral Agata, you brought up. And I just thought I would let you talk a little bit more about that and provide some comments. Thank you.
Admiral Agata? Yeah.
Yes. The problem in the Red Sea, though having roots in political or geopolitical situation, I think the military solution cannot be out of place, but it can never be the solution to the problem. I think there is need for, and this is a global issue. All that we are talking about today is not just affecting the countries within the region of the Red Sea, but it's a global issue. The threat about the, just like Dr. Rabi mentioned, it's not only the Americans or the British or Israel that will feel it. It's going to be the entire globe. Russia is going to feel it. China is going to feel it. Iran is going to feel it. So this calls for a international cooperation. I know it's difficult, but it's a requirement. So long as that consensus is not there among especially the big powers in dealing with these issues, it's going to consume everybody. And coming back to the Gulf of Guinea, the Yaoundé architecture has, we celebrated the 10 years existence of that initiative. And by the assessment, it has done quite well, but with a lot of room for improvement. And this happening right now is a clarion call to move forward in the implementation of the Yaoundé Code of Conduct. Because as we have heard here, the copycat issue is critical. I can say here that I don't think there is any navy within the Gulf of Guinea that has the capability in terms of drone operation for defense. So if any of the non-state actors are able to learn this from the Houthis and start, deploying within the Gulf of Guinea against shipping, we will need to maybe depend on the international navies or our friends to come to our help. But this is the time to start developing those capacities by the various navies. As I said, you don't need to wait for the threat to come and meet you before you start, planning to counter it. This is the time. A lot needs to be done within the Gulf of Guinea to address these multifaceted threats that we are seeing. Because as we have seen, most of these non-state actors learn from themselves. And the internet today has made the world to become a global village. What is happening right there in Yemen, you have seen it in Nigeria today. You can also do further research on the internet and acquire that capacity. But what is needed is that the states, the Navy, the various stakeholders need to come together and profile solutions or strategies that will be able to deal with these matters when they arise. As Captain Hale has mentioned, it's not a matter of just coming to sit in a conference and discussing about those things. There must be concrete step forward, ways forward in dealing with those issues. And not just on paper, but there need to be implementation. So on the whole, the crisis we are facing, though having a political root, the solution cannot be military. We need political solution, and that has to start from the highest level, the UN. And as we have all seen and we are witnesses to it, there are a lot of division within the UN system, especially among the major powers, has been a bane in coming out with a very robust solution to this problem. And I think that is just the key. There must be a way of going around it, because when the problem comes, it's going to consume everybody. Nobody will be exempted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Great comments. Many of the countries in the Gulf of Guinea have very good maritime security strategies or maritime strategies. Nigeria, for example, has both a national security strategy and a national maritime strategy. And those strategies were based on certain threats. And what I would like to underscore is the need to reassess the threats and refresh strategies so that the implementation can be done to prepare. And largely, we are reacting to what happened. We're not being proactive. And the Gulf of Guinea now has an opportunity to be proactive. It's not happening right now, but it could. And I'm glad that Ian brought up the issue of cables, because as everyone in Ghana knows, this was a real issue and currently is an issue in terms of the impact on the internet in Ghana. And this may not have been a terrorist action to cut the cables, but it could be. And what is the response from Gulf of Guinea countries to protect those cables? And what are the capabilities you need to do that? And what are the and the final thing that I think really has been highlighted by what everybody's been saying is that the Houthis were very good at strategic communications. How good is the Yaoundé Code of Conduct at strategic communication? About the only communication I see is these pictures of people standing up and photos of groups standing in, well-dressed men and women after having meetings. What's the strategic communication there? And so this is something that really should be focused on. The way social media is being used to promote solutions, not just identifying problems, but what are the solutions? And I think that is where you can get support from international organizations and international partners. And I think the investment part of strategies, of the strategies in the Gulf of Guinea, I've assisted 13 countries in writing theirs. They all need to be refreshed because things change all of the time. And with technology, 6 months, things are obsolete. 6 months in technology terms is the half-life. So that technological effort is very, very important. So I think, Lawrence, is there another question that we'd like to? Let me just say one other thing about cost. The cost of diverting traffic from the Red Sea around the Cape of Good Hope is a cost. It can be, whether it's cargo or tanker, can be identified. You can Google those costs now because the costs are changing a lot. But there's a cost in money because of the additional distance you have to go and the fuel costs. There's a cost in insurance, and there's also a cost in time. But let me just talk about time a little bit. Once you have ships going through routes, time is no longer a problem. In fact, it's more reliable if you don't have a disruption of sitting and waiting for a canal at either the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. And so once that rhythm begins, the extra time is just not relevant. It's relevant when you first start, but not when things continue. You should keep that in mind. That's fundamental to this idea. And so the extra costs that are associated, the big one is insurance. And that insurance is there because of threats like the Houthis. So I'll turn this back to Lawrence. Lawrence, would you like to
Yes, Phil.
pose questions? And
Yeah.
what is the time? What are our time factor? How much longer?
So we have about 15 minutes more.
Okay.
But I think we can take some questions now. But I'd also like to remind our participants joining us that if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand. If you have any contributions, you can just raise your hand, and the floor will be open to you to make your contributions or comments. But I would like us to go to the chat box now and pick some questions. This one is from Lieutenant Commander Kofi Amponsah-Dodu from the Ghana Navy. And he is asking that if pirate action groups team up with terrorists from the Sahel, this Houthi situation can easily occur in the Gulf of Guinea. And how should military and political entities position themselves to prevent this? He believes that the ongoing situation in the Red Sea offers opportunities for littoral states, like the Gulf of Guinea states, position themselves to make use of this windfall, albeit an unfortunate situation. So is this something that Dr. Hein, you want to respond to? Okay, so the floor is yours, Doc.
Thank you so much. I would love to respond to that because that actually ties into the last thing I was going to say earlier, which is that there's a negative consequence of the Red Sea in some ways, and that it is diverting everyone's attention away from other areas where there's been a focus. So a lot of attention has left the Gulf of Guinea. A lot of attention has left other areas where we've been putting in attention to make the maritime space more safe, secure, stable, and prosperous, because everybody focuses on the hot issue. That isn't such a bad thing in some ways, because if everybody's attention is diverted, we have a weird phenomenon where memories ends up being short. And so everybody kind of forgets about Gulf of Guinea piracy when it isn't in the news, when it isn't a major focus. That gives the region a little bit of space, time, and opportunity to rethink how it's going to approach the security of the region. Now, one really important point I want to make is that what the Houthis are doing is not piracy in the same way that Gulf of Guinea pirates, that East African pirates, that South China Sea pirates have been focusing on. They're not looking for money out of these attacks. The attacks are the victory themselves because of the attention they bring, the impact, the statement they make, the recruiting they make, etc. So they're terrorists, not financially motivated, attacks. So that means that how we change the risk-reward calculus for that kind of a situation has to be different than how we change it for those who are just looking to make financial illicit profits. So we have to, again, to the point of strategy, we have to be very clear in understanding who our enemies are, what their motivation is, what their goal is, what their interests are, because that's how we change what they end up doing, and how we respond is so important. So if we're going to look at how terrorist groups in the Sahel might team up with pirate action groups, we have to get very clear on a couple of things. First of all, a lot of the pirate action groups and terrorist organizations haven't worked together in the past, partly because their motivations were completely different. One of the most laughable things I saw during one of the cases I was involved with in the Gulf of Guinea was that the crew of this pirated vessel talked about how the pirates read the Bible to them every day. And then they made the assessment that all the money was going to go to Boko Haram. Now, if you know about a Christian group that sits down and reads the Bible with the pirates, you probably understand that they're not likely to give the money that they get to Boko Haram. And it's these kinds of absurd connections that just don't make any sense if you actually think about them, that we sometimes jump to. And so we need to really look at the interests, really look at the motivations. What this prevents is I said there were 4 bad, 1 good. The good opportunity, and Phil's already talked about this a little bit, is that the region could really brand itself as being reformed, cohesive, coherent on maritime security, able to work together through the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, the regional centers of Crestmac and Crestmail, and the zones, and to be mutually supportive in building regionalized distributive capacity to accept the higher quantity of goods and shipping. I brief the shipping industry every week. One of the things that is now being discussed is changing how shipping has been moving. We have been seeing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger ships able to carry more goods on one vessel. The problem with that is that they're deeper, they're wider, they're less mobile. So if we look at whether it's the Ever Given, the low water levels in the Panama Canal, or the disruption in both the Suez and the Bab el-Mandeb right now, as well as the potential for having to be more agile in avoiding piracy incidents in East Africa, in South China Sea, wherever, we are starting to see that the shipping industry is looking at potentially being more nimble. So I said that they had excess capacity that has allowed for them to be agile, which is a good thing, but they're also looking at how they're going to move. And so hub and spoke is potentially a much more interesting thing. And so I was talking to the head of security at one of the largest shipping lines just the other day, and he's saying they're starting to reassess what ports might be of interest and look at ports that nobody's calling at, that have space, that have opportunities. And so I think this isn't a time where, going to Phil's last point about Yaoundé and strategic communications, everyone could come together to essentially rebrand the region that has been momentarily forgotten about, which is not a bad thing all in and of itself, because it allows
Dr.
for
Robbie,
a new
Dr.
image.
Robbie,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'll have to come back to you again.
That's all right. That was the last thing I
Yes.
was going to say. Just
All right,
rebrand.
thank you. Yes. So rebranding, the interest, looking at the interest and the motivations of these pirate action groups, teaming up potentially with terrorists in the Sahel. I have a question for the speakers to think about while I go to Rad Maragada, and that is the Gaza war related to the Red Sea? So I would like the speakers to think about this, Dr. Robbie and Captain Phil, but I would like to come to Rad Maragada to receive his submission. Thank you.
Yes, regarding the question of pirate action groups teaming up with terrorists, for me, I think what the countries in the Gulf of Guinea should do right now is to assume that we are having the situation of the Red Sea within the Gulf of Guinea and plan on how to deal with it. Because you don't wait for the terrorist group. For instance, Boko Haram can never have any collaboration with the pirate action groups in Nigeria, could become terrorists by applying the tactics of the Houthi rebels. That is what should be the fear, and what you need to work towards having a solution to it now. So, as we have said, the social space for people to copy things that are happening far away and implement it. So, what is happening in the Red Sea today is something that can definitely happen.
Okay, I think we lost Admiral Gada, and so we hope he's able to join us pretty much soon. But I would like to come back to the question of whether the Red Sea whether the Gaza war is related to the Red Sea crisis. So Dr. Robbie, Captain Phil.
I'll just say very quickly, I just put it in the chat. The two are separate. The Houthis have their own interests. They have their own approach, but they have linked what they are doing to what is happening in Gaza by narrative. They don't actually care. They don't care about the plight of the Palestinians. They don't care, other than that they ultimately want to destroy Israel because they want Jerusalem to be the seat of their holy empire. As long as we allow them, though, to continue this connection, this narrative, and it's very hypocritical for them to do so, based on what I said before. We're going to make it very hard for the Red Sea situation to be handled because, as I said, no one in the region, Egypt included, will step up to counter the Houthis as long as it may be perceived that doing so is some way helping Israel. And so we've allowed them to have that connection for too long. It has to be broken if we want to fix the situation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Robbie. I believe we lost Admiral Gada due to some bandwidth issues. So I'd like to give you a minute to conclude on your earlier submissions.
Yeah, as I was saying, we do not, for instance, in Nigeria, I don't see the pirate action groups within the Niger Delta, but the pirate action groups within the Niger are doing right now. And it is similar to any other coastal state within the Gulf of Guinea that aggrieved elements in any of the unstable countries that are within the maritime environment can resort to such action. So it behoves on the countries within the Gulf of Guinea to take steps to strengthen collaboration and also to enhance their capability in dealing with these threats that we are seeing today. We do not wait for those threats to come upon us physically before we start acting against them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radmagala. I would like to take some more questions. We have about 5 minutes more. So if anyone has a comment, a contribution, a question to any of the speakers, you can just raise your hand and it will come to you.
I see a question in the chat.
Yeah.
How does the situation in the Red Sea affect the perception Indo-Pacific versus Indo-Atlantic? And I think it's a fantastic question. And one of the things that we're seeing is that some of the major trading partners are starting to lose out, India being the number one. India is actually being avoided by some of the lines that are looking at routing and timing to the key markets, being quicker going across the southern Indian Ocean and to the Cape of Good Hope rather than to India first and then through the Red Sea as they had been doing. And so what we're likely to see is that it's not necessarily an issue of perception. It's just an issue of access and timing. We're going to see trade routes starting to shift, and we are seeing a problem with, to Phil's point earlier, insurance being increased oddly in the Trans-Pacific route, which makes no sense. So fees, other things increasing on account of the rerouting. But there's a turbulent period, as Phil kind of said, that is starting to even out. But a couple key partners are starting to feel like they're losing out of this. So Pacific is still now seen as being perhaps the better alternative. If you're just going to avoid some of the markets in South Asia in order to get to the United States, that's a real problem. Europe is feeling it.
Okay, so Dr. Raobi, in 1 minute, what's your take home? What's your take home comment on the general Red Sea situation, and what should be the one thing that participants get away and think about from this discussion?
We have to deal with the situation as it is, not how we wish it to be. The situation is terrible. We need to look at what is really beneath it and how we can change it. For the Gulf of Guinea, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to refocus and create an attractive alternative for global shipping. We have to understand what shipping lines care about, the same way we have to understand what the Houthis care about. And to that, we need to create an open dialogue so that the Gulf of Guinea can understand what would make the region more attractive to global shipping and maritime commerce, because ultimately it could benefit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raobi. I'll come to you now, Captain Phil. What are your thoughts on the general discussion so far? And what should be the table for participants? Yeah.
Great, thanks. I think that just to take that point that Ian just made about
Phil. Sorry, Captain Phil. You just have 1 minute for this as we want to round up. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. A maritime dialogue is something that the ICC in Yaoundé asked IMO to assist with, because IMO has connections with maritime industry. And we will be doing that over the next year in 2024. So a maritime dialogue between the navies and coast guards, the civilian authorities, industry, and to discuss what are the threats, what are the risks, and what is the collective role of all of the stakeholders to get this, to be prepared for these. So I think the big takeaway is preparation, and now there's an opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Phil. Rad Margada, your take-home comments on the Red Sea situation.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I think the situation calls for great dealing with this threat that is a huge blow for all humanity. And coming back to the Gulf of Guinea, what I will suggest is for reawakening in terms of the collaboration, reviving the structures that we have. For instance, the Gulf of Guinea Maritime Collaboration Forum, Shared Awareness and the Completion needs to be revitalized. The various industry working group that brings together the shipping industry and the maritime stakeholders need to also be revitalized, because once there is that interface and discussion, then we can come up with strategies that can be implemented. And I appreciate Captain Hill for the effort he's making through the IMO to actually strengthen the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, and I crave that in a few short distance from now, that will become a reality, because those are the
Thank you very much, Rad Margada. Thank you very much. Let me thank the panel once again for joining us today for this very insightful discussion on the Red Sea situation. I believe we've been able to sort of achieve our objectives in terms of understanding the geopolitical dimensions of the issues, the economic implications of alternative rerouting of vessels through the Cape of Good Hope and then the Gulf of Guinea, and also sort of understanding whether the military responses have been successful, and if there are alternative options that leaders should be considering in resolving the crisis in the Red Sea. I would like to thank the participants also for joining us for today's Imswg meeting. For the Imswg members that joined us today, sincere appreciation to you all. There are a lot of questions coming through that unfortunately we can't take them now. What we can do is we are going to send these questions to the panel and ask for their comments on that, and then share them with you in the coming days. This is the first quarter in the work of the Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute program under the International Maritime Security Working Group, the first meeting of the working group on the Red Sea crisis. We welcome new participants to join the International Maritime Security Working Group. Kindly visit our website, www.gogmi.org.gh, and fill in the form, and we'll review it, and then we'll get in touch with you on the necessary steps. It's been a very insightful morning. I'd like to thank Captain Phil, Dr. Raubi, Rad Margada, for joining us for today's session. Thank you to our partner, the Atlantic Center, also for joining us today. The outcome of this session, which is usually a report, and then the recordings of the meeting will be shared with you in the subsequent days. So thank you very much, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Lawrence. Great job moderating.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you
very much.
Fantastic.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.